Welcome to Real Herbalism Radio, show 296, recorded at Big Dog Studios in Eugene, Oregon. Today's show is brought to you by Mud Pod Design House. Do you have a website? Are you happy with its traffic? The answer is no. Get a free website SEO audit from Mud Pod Design at mudpoddesign.com/free-SEO-audit. Ace High Graphics. We print custom t-shirts, hats, hoodies, bags, and more using a low-impact, heat-infused printing process you can trust. Get a quote today at acehighgraphics.com. Herbalism and holistic medicine often clash with modern scientific champions over the best path to healing. The thing is, the two are far more intimately connected in their research and results than they realize. Today we're talking with Matthew Wood, herbalist with the Masters of Science in Herbal Medicine from the Scottish School of Herbalism, accredited by the University of Wales, author of many books on herbalism, Herbal Educator and Practitioner at the Matthew Wood Institute of Herbalism, about modern and traditional perspectives on why holistic healing works. Now here are your hosts.
I'm Candace Hunter.
I'm Patrick Hunter.
And welcome to Real Herbalism Radio. Welcome back, Matthew.
Thank you.
We had such a great lead-in last time to this book, and I know everyone's excited to hear about it because it made Candace cry.
It did. It made me cry. I'm not kidding. There were like actual tears and everything.
I didn't know a Kindle could elicit such emotion.
I was very fortunate to have a review copy of the Holistic Medicine and the Extracellular Matrix, The Science of Healing at the Cellular Level by Matthew Wood.
Yeah, they chose the subtitle. I like to emphasize that it's the science of holistic medicine proved. Science is now on our side. It's not on the side of reductionism. Yeah, sure, you can study the molecules and the atoms all you want, but that's not the organizational level of organic life. It's the ground regulatory system, it turns out, which regulates cellular life, makes the organism into one organism on the one whole on the cellular level. So that to me is the biggest message of all. But yes, there's some herbalism in there and stuff too. So, and holistic medicine.
There is. One of the things I loved about it was the way that you deconstructed science and used that language to then explain what we already know to be true from experience based on traditional medicine, but also based on like just real world practical experience. I mean, there's a lot of pieces like, of course, my mind is just going to go blank on which herbs, but, like calendula doing a wonderful job of, drawing skin together and healing, chasing away the bacterial infections and drying up and warming areas.
Yeah.
I've just seen it happen,
Yeah. Yeah. So again, my background growing up in the Seminole Res comes up because to me, science, to the extent it's part of a kind of chauvinistic part of Western culture, is a genocidal practice, and they're so immersed in it, they don't see that. They just think this is the truth. Yeah. Science is their religion. Yes. Materialism is the truth. There's a quote a couple people have noticed. I'll have to dig it out again, but I say somewhere basically science, they cut off empathy, they cut off intuition, imagination, instinct. I didn't say clairvoyance, we could include that, the heart, and they cut all that out, and then what's left over they call the basis for determining truth.
Right.
It's like, what's wrong with this picture?
Yeah, you've cut off like 75% of reality.
Yes.
In fact, I was thinking, I was looking at the quote that I wrote about the reductionism.
Yeah.
Yeah. That I copied. I should say I didn't write it. Oh. I copied it. Okay. What I copied, one of the quotes that stood out for me was that the organism operates on the cellular level as a whole, and that the premise of holistic medicine, to treat the organism as a whole, united in operation and intelligence, is fully justified. The reverse is also true. Reductionism, seeking meaning in the smallest particle, is not justified as a model for how biological systems work. It is justified simply as a method for understanding the components of the whole, not for comprehending the functions of the whole as a unit. And that to me really summed up where modern medicine has gone so very, very wrong.
Yeah.
And part of it
they
is,
are not scientifically justified in using that model, which they consider to be the truth and the basis of fact. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, modern medicine is very much like a battlefield, the way that it is practiced. I mean, the training is like training soldiers.
Yeah.
And
now with evidence-based medicine, it's like, if it's not on the test, they don't care.
Right.
Like they just dismiss you if you've been to a doctor. I hadn't been to a doctor for 35 years, but once I got Medicare or whatever it is, I tuned in. You know, I took a walk in from the Harry Potter world into the world, and I was like, no wonder people come to see me. They don't pay any attention to what people's experience are. And the guy was a nice guy, you know.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, even the term evidence-based medicine, really, it's one of the ones that angers me because it's not evidence-based. If it was evidence-based, they would be listening to all the evidence, not just a tiny portion of it.
And interestingly enough, the guy, I think his name was Richard Sackett, but maybe he was an earlier follower, but the guy who came up with evidence-based medicine, that was part of his model, and they threw that away and he disowned the term.
Nice.
That was not what he was intending.
Yeah.
He did want to include empiricism experience. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that the way that we practice modern medicine today, or the way that modern medicine is practiced today, has been all about just the heroic aspect of it, which, you know, there's a lot to be said for looking at lab work and tests and stuff if you're right in the middle of a heart attack that you're trying to treat someone for, or in an extreme crisis situation. But that really doesn't work well when you're talking about prevention or longer term, longer chronic issues and that sort of thing.
Yeah, in fact, they would never look behind the screen to see why you had a heart attack, you know?
Right.
Well, they might consider high blood pressure, but that would be about it.
Right. And they wouldn't even try to figure out why the high blood pressure is high. They wouldn't dig far enough to figure out what's the root of that problem to actually cure it.
Yeah, right. Yep. Yeah. So the introduction itself is good. Mm-hmm. And that really kind of shows you don't take the science too seriously, but we're going to use the science, because I do quote all these various, I love that John Ionides that came out in 2003. That I became aware of that reading that paper while I was at the Scottish School of Herbal Medicine, and he said the name of his paper was "Why 70% of all medical papers are opinion, not fact," because he's a statistician. He said that the mathematical models they use are so insufficient that 70% can't prove anything. The same year, Marcia Angel came out from the New England, former editor of the New England Journal of Medicine, just saying the corrupting effect of big pharma money is so complete that you can't trust anything. And then I have a quote from Richard, starts with H, I can't remember his name, the editor of the Lancet, just shocked by how, that's a great quote, although he just says as much as 50% of our science may be an illusion, it's really more than that. But he's just shocked. And he's the editor of the Lancet.
Right.
So, yeah, that's in the introduction. And so the introduction alone is good on a different subject. And then we get to the matrix. Yeah.
I mean, I love the fact that you were talking about science as being this not nearly as
a tool.
Yeah, I mean, it's not. Yeah, I love that, and I love the fact that you were able to encapsulate it in the whole idea that we've built all this science around the idea of the cell, when in fact the cell is, it's like the house. And the environment is the part that matters most. The cell has, the house, you take your stuff home and you do things in your house and then you go back out. But your environment has a huge impact, it's too hot, you close your house up. When there's smoke outside from wildfires, you close the house up and put on the air cleaners. When it's, hot and the air conditioning isn't working, you open the house up and you put fans in the windows. I mean, it's all the environment that dictates so many things,
Well, yeah, it speaks to our times. So in 1858 or whenever it is, Rudolf Virchow, famous, comes up with the cell theory, which is the basis of biology and medicine down to the present, which is that the cell is the basic unit of life. Mm-hmm. And so the drug is directed at the molecular bonding, the orifice, so the molecular bonding site on the wall of the cell, and it bypasses the ground regulatory system, which is the system that regulates all the cells, keeps them all together in one, so that everybody closes their windows when there's a fire.
Right.
Everybody has a tin roof or shingle roof to keep the rain out. Everybody has windows, and everybody's responding the same way to the weather. And so the matrix is the weather, and the matrix is full of these signals from the capillary wall to the cell wall, and in between there's these polymers that hold electrical charges to cut short on it. And every time more salt or less salt or more water or less water or food, glucose comes in, it's like there's a signal, and every single cell in the body knows it. More glucose. Whoa, okay. And so the ground regulatory system tells the cell to eat, tells the cell to eliminate, to migrate, or to reproduce. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it has control over apoptosis. That's the death and destruction of the cell, but I just realized that'd be interesting to know. But at any rate, the matrix controls the environment and all the cells, and they're all bound together. And the cell theory is wrong. Mm-hmm. The cell is not the ultimate unit of life. It is the cellular level. Yeah. And Alfred Pissinger, who discovered the ground regulatory system, was a alternative doctor from the University of Vienna, again, medical school. And he realized that he discovered the basis of holism and disproved Virchow. And actually, the University of Vienna Medical School had been fighting Virchow for 120 years. Yeah. They did not believe. They were the one medical school that held out, that did not accept this as truth. It is only a theory after all. And to me, this is like Galileo and the Catholic Church, only this was generations. So during Virchow's life, Karl van Rokitansky, head of the medical school there, and a very esteemed doctor, he said, no, it's not the rule of the cell, it's the rule of the capillary, basically. It's like the same as osteopathy. The rule of the arterial is supreme, and where the blood is or isn't, that controls disease. And Virchow, proved him wrong, quote unquote. Of course, that's been proved incorrect too, right, because he didn't have fine enough instruments. But Rokitansky was esteemed enough that still has a place in German language and Eastern European medicine. Okay, so next generation, they name the ground substance, the polymers in the matrix. They've discovered that. Next generation, Pissinger discovers there's this communication system. 1975, he publishes it. It still is not known. I looked up, I found a very good alternative medicine website, and it still had it wrong. The cell is the basic unit. Almost all conventional and unconventional doctors and practitioners still believe that, and it's wrong. Mm-hmm. We're back to Hippocrates. The cell is controlled by the humors, by the ocean around it. And Pissinger even addressed, so people say, well, how about the single cell floating in the ocean? That doesn't have a ground regulatory system. And he said, no, seawater is the regulatory system of the cell.
Yeah.
I actually love that quote. Yeah. That was really cool. Yes. I was like, oh, yes. I get it. That's when I understood what you were talking about.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes. And it almost to me, that's like one of those Fossack statements I was talking about, where you just state a fact and it says, oh my God, that means that we're controlled by our environment. And and one thing the book is still not out, available to the public until November 6th or 9th or something. But two of my friends have read it or parts of it, and they just listened to what I had to say, and they both came up with an interesting comment. They said, well, this is like the mycelium under the soil that links the whole forest together, and the whole forest is in communication. And I was like, oh my God, I could have put that in the book. And when we walk on the bare soil, we are in contact with that. It's incredible.
Well, it also explains why people who are highly empathic can actually be feeling the emotions and recognize the emotionals and other experiences of whomever it is they're with at the moment, because the waters of their body are resonating with the waters of the other, and they're communicating at the ground regulatory system level. And that's powerful to be able to say there's a scientific basis for this. It's not a bunch of woo-woo crazy stuff, Yes.
There's this debate about, well, does the nervous system communicate with the cell? No, it does not. Well, the waste products from the nervous system, where do they go? They ooze off into the matrix. So the matrix is full of all that stuff from the nervous system, and that goes back to the hypothalamus is looked at again, and regulation changes on the endocrine level, which is another regulatory system. So we have nervous system, endocrine system. We have biomechanical system, that's on the bones and joints, which keeps us coordinated. And then we have the ground regulatory system. We have at least, and then there are some cellular communication things. But so that has to be taken into account. Well, that's like 5 different regulatory systems. But on the cellular level, this is so powerful. This is the main thing binding everything together.
Yeah, that's the part. The matrix itself is what's resonating with other people or with whatever's in your environment, all of that. For people who are, when you're talking about those empathic things, or just, the visions, the things that we pick up that seem spiritual and so esoteric, and like maybe you're just making that up. But the reality is that you're just interpreting what your matrix is informing you of, really.
Yeah.
I mean, so yeah.
Yeah. And I do think, so the matrix, so how does it communicate? Polymers are molecular, they're not fibers, like technically they're a single molecule wide fiber, so to speak.
Right.
So they're called, we could call them filaments. They're polymers. They're not really a fiber, but if we call them that, then we're just slipping into normal speech. But so they hold an electric charge, and that water comes in, and the electric charge changes. Of course, it's going to change. Or salt, because that's electrolyte, and everything changes, and the charge changes. And so, in a way, also, I do think this is our energy body. I was not that interested in trying to translate it into esoteric, ideas. Actually, so there are 2 books by Pissinger and Heine, Heine, and Pissinger, Pischinger, one published in the United States and one in Germany. They're kind of the same book, but different, so different that they're worth reading. But that's the only books on the matrix I could find. That is it, and it's by the discoverer, But I can't remember what I was going to say here, what my point was, but it was something that's in that book.
One of the things, let's see, one of the quotes that I wrote down a whole bunch of stuff, and some of it might be helpful and some of it might not. But one of the things that I really enjoyed about it was your discussion of the 4th phase water and why alchemists collect dew and rainwater. Because that was one of those things that I've read about in books. It sounds really esoteric and weird and like, oh, that's just some little alchemy thing. Just go to the kitchen sink, you're good. But there's actually a good scientific rationale for, not watering your garden with hose water if you can use rainwater, and,
Yeah. So that's the work of Gerald Pollack, Pollack, who I would say is the other scientist, other than Pissinger, that even though that's just a little section of the book, it's well worth, he deserves credit. He was at the University of Bellingham, Washington, and I think he's retired. I think they kind of forcefully retired him because they weren't interested in this research, which of course is tremendously important.
Yeah.
So we think of water as H2O, that's normal water. But if water is on a hydrophilic surface, water-loving surface like a rock or a roof, and the sun is beating on it, it's changed from H2O to H3O plus / H2O2. So they each pick up an extra electron in a different way, and one is positively charged, one is negative, and they cling to each other. And this creates the fourth state of water, as he calls it, a liquid crystalline gel. And all organic life, that is the water inside of us.
Yeah.
And if our we have cell respiration, it releases H2O, and that's a waste product. And it, in our fingers, the sunlight shines through, and the sunlight gets, a certain distance into the capillary bed. So it's being renewed all the time, but some of it goes out in the vapor in our breath. And it really kind of does matter that maybe having your water, I have well water, but that's pretty good, but it doesn't get the sunlight until it comes out of the tap.
Yeah.
And putting it in the sunlight actually changes it. I remember one of my friends was at the International Herb Symposium in Boston 20 years ago, and she got quite sick with the flu. And in those days, we weren't afraid of the flu. And she went to a doctor there who was a Vietnamese doctor that was presenting, and he said, "Throw water on roof, drink." What? But okay, that's crazy water, let's call it. I wish I'd called it that in the book. But nice. and then that's what Dr. Bach, you put your herb in the sunshine. I'm gonna try to find a very wide, not too deep plate for doing sunflower essences from now on. And the alchemists use the dew, and so that's amazing. But so that water figures into it as one of the things, and it's full of electrolytes, which figure in. Electrolytes, I guess you'd say, as a regulatory system as well, kind of assisting here. So Pissinger discovered this, and he asked the question, well, how come everybody's not racing to embrace this theory? It's because they are taught cause and effect, linear thinking in their education from first grade on, and certainly in medical and science school. They just don't think that way. They can't see the whole. But a very profound statement was made by one of the researchers, and I quoted her. I can't pronounce her name, so I don't have it memorized. I would slaughter it, Anna something. But she said, one of the great problems with the matrix is the inability to visualize it. Yeah. And it was like presto. Yes, it is so hard for the alternative people as well as the regular people. So that was my job. It's almost my motto. How do you visualize this? That's what I'm trying to do. And my plot in my mind is that this will be known and taken for granted in 10 years in the alternative community, not just herbalists, but throughout, I hope. And then I hope that some sneaky regular science person reads the book and kind of decodes it, leaves out the little occult astrological nuances and the snipes against science that I put in there. And the herbs
begins to infiltrate.
Rewrites it all for their audience, and then they will begin to understand it. Yeah. I mean, because he came up with this theory in 1975, and there's just 2 books on it by the same book by him and Heine, which are really just a series of papers. And his primal paper there is pretty right to the point, but it's still, and then I had to do things like the rebound effect to show how medicinal substances act in the matrix, because the cell theory is wrong. If the cell theory is wrong, then the structure function claim that the FDA uses and Big Pharma is wrong too. That's the problem, as he points out, as they point out, drugs bypass the regulatory system, and therefore they actually make you less healthy ultimately.
Right. Yes. Yeah. And, that was part of the quote that I read last time was from that section. And it was about what I call the mule nature, but it's really what I've noticed. I have a mule nature, and I tend to there are certain drugs that if I take them, like for instance, Benadryl, I grew up in Minnesota, right? Hay fever season, really bad there, especially as the humidity comes on, it really holds that pollen great. And so I would have strong histamine reactions, of course. And so then I would take the Benadryl, and once every 4 years it works. And then I can't take it for 4 years because my own extracellular matrix just says, oh, well, we're going to readjust for that because that wasn't what we wanted. You were targeting the cells, and we just don't like being told what to do. So we're not going to really respond, and it overcompensates, and therefore Benadryl stops working, and it takes about 4 years for my body to reset. Herbs, on the other hand, continue to work. They work repeatedly and consistently, especially when I follow the really low number of drops dosing that I learned from Dawn, who I believe learned it from you, which is that, that's the mule nature is really strong with me. So really small number of drops, all I have to do is nudge my extracellular matrix and say, well, what if we went in that direction instead? And then it says, oh, okay, we'll think about that. We'll change. It's great. But if I try to force it,
I have a lecture out there. I forgot whose institute it's at, but I called it nudgeopathy.
And it's real. I mean, some people are more willing, and I've noticed Patrick's more willing to go with whatever the powers that be, the group is dictating or whatever. He's got less mule nature, and his body will respond to drugs more positively than mine. It'll work. They'll continue to work, at least for a while, and he takes slightly more drops. Dawn would give him 20 drops for the dose instead of the 3 for me.
This is Dawn Gates, we should mention, who is lives in Florida, practitioner down there. She does teach with me in a few classes on my institute. An amazing person. I would like to get her in charge of a medical section on the. Oh yeah. She's a medical a nurse, cardiologist nurse. So she's not the one I talked about last time with the heart surgery. That was a different cardiologist nurse.
Yeah, she was on our show recently as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, so let's see other points. Oh, so one thing that was fun was the people who discovered how to treat the matrix, even when they didn't have a thorough, before the science was known. They figured out that it's basically in, mix, out.
Yes.
The toxins come in, things mix in there, metabolism is complete or incomplete, there's waste products, and then it's out. So how do you clean the matrix? And the matrix is the basic environment for all the cells, therefore it's the first organ system. I'll get to that, and the primary one. So if you can keep it clean, you're going to be in pretty good shape. So how do you do this? So it would be Corwin Samuel West, a Mormon naturopath in Salt Lake City, and he just figured out one method for everybody, and that is to clean the lymph, jump on the on a lymphocyzer, a little trampoline.
Yep.
And then to keep the toxins from coming in, he preached vegetarianism, not veganism, but just limited protein, which therefore you get less proteins irritating the system. And I was like, I'm a meat eater. I don't know if I approve of this.
Right.
I mean, I could have wisdom, but I'm like, I needed to be told. Pissinger and Heine say, so the best way to begin a detoxification of the matrix is a protein fast. They didn't say become a vegetarian. They just say fast off of proteins. Whoa, okay. okay, on the medical school of Vienna, I will listen to what they have to say. And so that's one system. And he wasn't against herbalism, homeopathy, massage. Lymphatic massage would be incredible. You know, and we do have to say whatever diet works for you, you got to stick by.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah. So that was a beautiful thing. That and then Marguerite Maury, who was a French MD, who really got aromatherapy going. She understood it too. She understood the matrix, and that's what she was treating. Unfortunately, she doesn't give a lot of detail in her book on how to treat the matrix. She gives, and it's all in aromatherapy rather than herbalism, but it can be translated. I mean, violet was an important herb for her, and that fits the herbalism that's in this book. So this type of respect I learned for the polymers, for the basic ground level of substratum of the body. Okay, so those polymers are basically what we call mucilage. Yeah. So it taught me a great increased respect for mucilage as an herbalist.
Oh yeah.
And violet, so I can see why violet would be important for her, aromatherapy or not.
Yeah.
And I mentioned marshmallow root, Solomon seal, opuntia or prickly pear, which I have not used. I did use it once. But and let's see what else. And then calendula. Yes, you mentioned calendula. We understand calendula better from knowledge of the matrix.
Yeah.
So all these things, you know, they're important. Then we have lymphatic remedies that drain better. I don't think I had poke root in there, red root, but they would drain better. Yeah, and then actually I did do a pretty good picture of the immune system, I think, in this book.
Oh yeah.
Which the mast cells, I mean, you know, once upon a time when I was, 5 years into working at present moment the herb store, I was in my 30s, and my boss started saying the mast cells. Is like, huh? So 30 years later I had to figure out what, okay, the mast cells. The mast cells are really they're part of the innate immune system, so they're primitive. They have been with us since, micro or, the vegetative sea slime level. And so they are both the first line of defense and the sentinels that call the higher, more advanced immune system that developed later on. And they're right there packed in next to the capillary. And the actual matrix polymers, their actual physicality, they have holes, can't get more than, nothing bigger than 15 angstroms can get through or something. So they're holding all that crap right there next to the capillary with the mast cells going crazy, fighting all the time. The mast cells are fighting all the time to keep us clean. So, I would have to say, I don't know how far into I can't remember now if I talked about that, but things like wild cherry and some of the rose family, some of the things that act on the mast cells and the immune system on histamine, these are all important. I will get to a book on the immune system at some point in time, lymph and immune system. I got it, 90% done, but it's 2 or 3 books down the line. And so that's important too. So, so we have herbs for the immune system right there. We have herbs for the matrix material, and we have herbs to drain through the lymphatics. And anything that improves circulation is going to be important. Yeah. Most of the immune remedies are what we'd call cooling, fibrifuges, etc. Most of the circulatory remedies that increase the peripheral circulation are warming, because they warm your toes, and that actually stimulates more capillaries the warmer your toes are. One fact I found, I don't have it was before the internet, so I don't know, I haven't looked it up, but I remember it. If every pound of fat you gain or weight, you gain 1 million miles of capillaries. Every pound you lose 1 million miles. It's like there's capillaries everywhere, and they're dying and being reborn, and we want those stimulants to keep us warm and healthy. Things like turmeric. So there's some of the herbalism of the Matrix book.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And there was like, to my own personal story, I wrote a long time ago, my son broke his arm. It wasn't a huge bad break, but I gave him bone set, and I can't remember what the other two herbs were, but bone set was one of the ones I put in there. And I mentioned it to a friend at the time who was also an herbalist, and she was much more of the scientific bent than I was. And she carried on about how bone set was only for fevers, and I was being foolish. And I did it anyway because it felt right. So I just, again, the mule sense kicked in, and I just followed what felt right. And my son, arm healed up just fine, continued. It was very close to a growth plate. The doctors were concerned, and then the healing was fine, and there was no problems.
Yeah.
And rereading what you talked about with bone set and how it works with the matrix and with the cells, I was like, yes, I was right. It turns out there was actually good reason.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's see. I don't know how long this internet will be up here. So we should probably wind down. I think we've covered the subject pretty well.
Yeah.
Again, science is now on our side, on the holistic side.
Yes.
That is so important. This is the basic organ system. I did want to talk about that because a bunch of cells, just the evolutionary overview, a bunch of cells formed a clone, a colony, genetically identical, down in a little hole in the bottom of the ocean. Mm-hmm. They started sending out polymers that became sea slime. And then they decided, we want to enclose our environment to have a little more control. So poof, the polymers are actually the brains. They say, okay, some of you cells migrate out and surround us. And then you have your multicellular organism with so you internalize the ocean with a bunch of polymers, and fibers too start to develop. And there you have your basic multicellular organism. So this is the primal organ system of the whole body, because it was the first system that developed in the multicellular organism. And the next was the biomechanical, or the connective tissue system, rising like a continent out of the ocean to become the bones, tendons, ligaments. So then we go from sea slime to jellyfish to starfish, and we're getting more and more solid. And finally, the world as we know it develops.
Yeah. Yeah, it's elegant, and it's beautiful to see the theories played out. The way that you brought them into very much real, like very tangible. You made them make sense, made them practical. So
yes, so we're going to infiltrate science, and the day will come. We'll say, "Well, you guys are wrong." It's just not a factor.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
All right, so where can people find your book and find you and get all the good stuff?
Yes, so I'm at Matthew Wood Institute of Herbalism, or woodherbs.com, and this book will be coming out from Inner Traditions on November 6th or 9th. They tell me. They keep on extending the date further back, but it'll get there. It sounds like a good Christmas present to yourself, if nothing else. But or for Thanksgiving weekend reading, for those of us who don't watch football games, or very much, and so that's pretty exciting. And I will send you a review copy of my other book that just arrived in the mail today.
Yeah, I was going to say you've got another one.
Yeah, that's self-published book more on shamanism. 7 guideposts on the spiritual path. Shamanism, the shamanism in the Book of Genesis. Yeah.
All right. And at the end of the show, okay, something else?
Nope, that's it.
Okay. All right. So last thing. So we're going to do our closer. Remember?
Oh yes.
Okay. Here we go. 1, 2, 3.
Put an herb on it.
Oh, where are we at?
Put an herb on it. Yes. Okay.
Last word. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks. It's been really fun.
The statements made about herbs and products on this podcast have not been evaluated by the United States Food and Drug Administration, FDA, and are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent disease. All information provided on this podcast or any affiliated websites is for informational purposes only and is not intended as a substitute for advice from your physician or other healthcare professional. You should not use the information on this podcast and its affiliated websites for a diagnosis or treatment of any health problem. Always consult with a healthcare professional before starting any new vitamins, supplements, diet, or exercise program before taking any medication, or if you have or suspect you might have a health problem. Any testimonials, questions, or case studies are based on individual results and do not constitute a guarantee that you will achieve the same results.